turn to 2 Kings chapter 6. Okay, 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8. And while you are turning there, I want to read you a few verses. Isaiah 6:10. Make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert, and be healed. Jeremiah 5:21. Hear now this, O foolish people, and without understanding, which have eyes and see not, which have ears and hear not. Ezekiel 12:2. Son of man, thou dwellest in the midst of a rebellious house, which have eyes to see and see not, they have ears to hear and hear not, for they are a rebellious house. Matthew 13:15. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest at any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, and should understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. Acts 28:27. For the sort of this people is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have they closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should be converted, and I should heal them. Last one, Romans 11:8. According as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear unto this day. If you notice in all of those verses, it says that God gave people's eyes to see, but they did not see. Ears to hear, but they could not hear. And that's because God is talking about spiritual sight and spiritual listening, hearing. Okay? So what I want to talk to you briefly about today is how we can see things spiritually. How to spiritually discern is a common Bible word for it. Spiritually see things and hear things that are going on. And the key is to look past the physical things that we see with our eyes. We tend to trust these, what we see with our eyes, what we hear with our ears. We want to find something that we can touch and lay hold on, and then we will believe. And that goes against, contrary to what God's will is, contrary to God's idea, which is faith. Okay? Now, faith has a substance. It's something there is really truly there. We just don't see it with these eyes. Alright? So, faith is not blind in the sense that it's not there. In other words, our faith is not guided by something that is feelings or something that is just how we digested our food from the night before. Our faith is guided by something that is real and there's evidence for it. But it's not something we see with our eyes. Okay? I hope you get what I'm saying. So, for example, evolution. Okay? The overall general theory of evolution is it's not technically even a theory, and there's no evidence for it. Okay? So you say, well, can I believe? How can I believe a God in what I cannot see? Cannot see God or hear Him? Well, evolution is faith in something that has no evidence. Whereas my faith in God, there is strong evidence for it. Okay? So what we're looking for is, how do we open up our spiritual vision, our spiritual eyesight, our spiritual hearing? Okay? And we're going to look at an example of a poor guy. I just feel bad for him, that had to go through a terrible experience so he could be forced to be able to see spiritually. Alright? Verse number 8, 2 Kings chapter 6. Then the king of Syria warred against Israel. Now, there's this king of Syria is Ben-Hadad, a wicked king. And then the king of Syria is Jehoram, another wicked king. And Ben-Hadad had warred with Jehoram's brother, Ahaziah. He had warred against his father, Ahab, king of Israel. And so now it's Jehoram is the next in line, and so Ben-Hadad is going to war against him too. It says, and took counsel with his servants, saying, and such a place shall be my camp. And the man of God sent unto the king of Israel, saying, beware that thou pass not such a place, for thither the Syrians are come down. So, every single time, Ben-Hadad would try to ambush Jehoram and kill him, catch him. Elisha knew about it, and he would warn Jehoram and say, hey Jehoram, don't go by this route, this mountain pass, or don't go through this valley, because there Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, is waiting to get you. It's an ambush. And the king of Israel sent to the place which the man of God told him and warned him of, and saved him there not once nor twice. So at least 3 times this happened. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled. Poor guy, poor baby. He was troubled because he wanted to kill an innocent king, his enemy, and so he was troubled by this. I don't have any sympathy for Ben-Hadad for this thing. And he called his servants and said unto them, will ye not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet that is in Israel telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. So one of the servants said, hey, look, king, whatever you say, even in your own bedroom, this prophet Elisha, he can hear you. He knows what you're saying. That's why you don't have a spy. The problem is Elisha serves a greater God than what we have. And he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he thither horses and chariots and a great host. And they came by night and compassed the city about. Now if you read the prior chapters here in 2 Kings, you can see that this chapter is in the middle of some chapters where it just goes through a whole list of miracles that Elisha was doing. Made an axe head that's made of iron swim in the water. And he made a pot that was soup that was poison, and he made it edible. And he made a lady, a widow was able to pour out oil, cooking oil, and use it to pay off a debt. And the vessel that she used to pour, it never ran out. Okay, Elisha was able to feed 100 men with just, I forget what it was. It was a few meal, I think is what it was, but just a little bit of food. And he was able to take that food and disperse it to 100 men and feed all of them. Okay, this is kind of a precursor to the feeding of the 4,000 men and the 5,000 men by Jesus. So we can see a long list of miracles that Elisha has done. And so we know that there is nothing that the king of Israel, Ahab, could have done to get Elijah, Elisha's former master. And there is nothing that the king of Israel, Jehoram, or Ahaziah, or now Ben-Hadad could do. We could see that this guy has great power with God, even to raise the dead back to life, like he did to the Shunammite woman whom he raised her son back to life. So Elisha has the power of life and death that God has given to him. And so it's almost kind of funny to see the king of Syria try and capture him and kill him through chariots and soldiers and horses. It's just not going to happen. But Elisha's servant Gehazi, he had just been diagnosed with recently in the last chapter with leprosy because of some theft. And so I won't get into that, but so now Elisha has a new servant. It says, verse 15, and when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, either out of the house or out of the city, it's not clear, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? So the poor servant did not understand the power that Elisha had, because it's his new servant. And he goes and he sees all these chariots and all these horses of the king of Syria, and he says, what are we going to do? They surrounded the city during the night. We cannot escape. What are we going to do? We're going to die. We can't fight off these soldiers. We're not soldiers. We're not fighters. And there's many of them. It's just me and you now, Elisha. What are we going to do? What was he looking at? He's looking at the soldiers of the king of Syria. What was he using? He's using these eyes that God had given him. And just like in the verses, it says that we can see this is an example of a person who has eyes to see, but he sees not. Okay, he has ears to hear, but he does not hear. And because of that, he is in great fear. So Elisha needs to calm him down. And he answered, "Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them." Okay, guess what? That's the same thing, the same message to us as well. When we look around, we see what the government's doing and what people around us are doing, and we see that the world and what they're doing, it looks like there's a lot more of them than there are of us. They have a lot more power, we think, than they do. And if we look with these eyes, we're right. But if we look with spiritual eyes, we know that God is on our side, and God is more powerful, and God has more than they could ever even think of. We have more power at our disposal than we could ever imagine. But we look at our circumstances and we say, hey, look, because of this, the government, because of the politicians, they've dried up our livelihood, they have caused us to go hungry, and they have caused us to make it more difficult to raise children and to get an education and to be able to make a living and to be able to do anything that we would want to do or need to do. And they've made it hard. They have all the power. They have all the control. Me, I can't even go out my gate and there's already a tanod just sitting there on a chair literally outside of the gate of my house. Brother James, Pastor James, his wife came to get picked up. And she came to our house for a visit, and she was pregnant. And when she left, the very next morning, there was someone knocking on my door saying, hey, where's that pregnant woman? I need to talk to you about the pregnant woman being here. They're everywhere. They have eyes, they have ears everywhere. And if I were to look with my physical eyes, I would say, I'm surrounded. I'm beat. There's too many of these guys, these thieves, these crooks are all over the place. But if I look at through my spiritual eyes, I say, God has led me here. God has brought me here. I'm safe in His will. Not physical safety, but spiritual safety. This is where God would have me to be. So this servant, he did not use his spiritual sight because he was too busy using his physical sight. And so he was filled with great fear. So Elisha says, don't be afraid. There's more power here than you realize. Verse 17, and Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. See, once that poor servant could see with his spiritual eyes, then he was able to see the horses and chariots of fire. Okay, now that was obviously the high value weapon at the time. Okay, so today you could say God has nuclear weapons of fire or whatever. God has more power than any person, any government, any tanod or barangay or mayor or anyone out there. And that includes your circumstances. Think about how Jesus loves you. Think about how Jesus calls you His child. He cares about the lilies of the field. He takes care of them. The sparrows, He takes care of them. And He loves you a lot more than those. And so we look at our circumstances right now through these eyes and we say, that's it, we're done, we're in trouble. Can't make a living. I don't have any food. I don't have any way to pay my bills. I'm going to lose my electricity. And I'm telling you that when you look through things through spiritual eyes, you're going to see that God loves you. Don't panic. God will take care of you. You have nothing to fear with the virus. You have nothing to fear with going hungry and starving to death. Maybe our priorities are wrong. Maybe we take too much comfort in the physical things that we've been given. And we need to look more closely at the things that God would have us to do that's important. In other words, if you're thinking, boy, my internet, how am I going to pay my internet bill? Well, maybe you don't need it. Okay? Maybe that's something that's distracting you from going out and winning people and giving the gospel and sharing with them It's distracting you from this spiritual job that God has given you. Verse 18 says, "And when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord, and said, Smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness, according to the word of Elisha." Alright? That's it. It's just a simple, short devotion to encourage you. There's a lot of bad things that we can see with our eyes physically. A lot of things going on that we don't like. And that puts fear in us, that scares us. And especially financial things. And we say, God, what are you doing? How am I going to do this? This is overwhelming. I can't do it. It's too much. But we need to remember what our focus should be is through our spiritual eyesight. What do we need to be seeing? Okay, do we need to see our savings? No, don't need to have any savings. Do we need to see how we're going to provide? How are we going to be sure that we'll have food on the table tomorrow? No, we don't need to do that. Alright? We need to look past the things that are physical, past the things that tie us down, past the things that distract us, and that keep us from going on and serving what God has given to us spiritually. What should you be seeing, and what should I be seeing with our spiritual eyes? Okay? And the answer is, it's what brings God glory. Alright? And I believe much of that has to do with seeing the lost. Alright? Sometimes I wake up at night and I think about lost people that I know. And I think about lost family members that I have, and lost friends that I have, loved ones. And it just grips me, and it pulls me into this place of fear. And you know why? Because I'm looking with my spiritual eyes, and I'm saying, there's a battle out there, and we're raging, and we're fighting, and sometimes we're winning, and sometimes we're losing, and it's a struggle, and it's hard, and that's the spiritual battle that we need to be paying attention to. But too often we're looking at the physical things around us, and we're paying attention only to the physical things around, and we're missing what's truly important. If you focus on the physical things, you might succeed physically. If you focus on getting rich, you might become rich. If you focus on becoming prosperous in this world and looking good and being glorified by the people around us on this earth, we might succeed at that. But then you've succeeded in something that does not matter. My encouragement to you today is look out there. Look out there. When you go to the mall, look out there at the mall. Or look out the window. And look out with your spiritual eyesight and see those people that are dying and going to hell by the millions and the billions. And that's what you need to be seeing. Don't see them as a body, or as young, or as old, or as good looking, or as ugly, or as fat, or as skinny. Look right into the windows of their soul. Look into their eyes with your spiritual eyes. Look into their soul, their spiritual soul, and say, why am I being distracted by what I'm seeing with my physical eyes when I need to be looking past that with my spiritual eyes?